Guys, did you hear about that guy? I think he's on death row. His name is Marcellus. Yeah, Marcellus Williams. I feel like we should talk about Marcellus Williams a little bit today. So he is scheduled to be executed on September 24th, and it's just not looking good because it seems like he's innocent from my understanding. But we're gonna watch some videos and we're gonna talk about it real quick. Just because, we have an hour and I feel like it's worth talking about within this hour. All right, let's see what Cori Bush has to say about Marcellus.
St. Louis and I rise today to say that state-sanctioned violence has no place in a humane society. Next Tuesday, Marcellus Khalifa Williams is scheduled to be executed for a crime he didn't commit. Despite credible evidence of Williams' innocence and mass scrutiny over the fairness of this trial, Missouri Governor Mike Parson and the courts have yet to stop an innocent man from being executed. Within the last 4 decades, only 4 individuals on death row have been exonerated in Missouri. Since 1973, at least 200 people have been exonerated from death row in the U.S. A 2014 study estimated that at least 4% of those sentenced to death are innocent, a majority of whom are black and brown. I am urging Governor Parson not to let another innocent man be murdered at the hands of the state. He must heed this call. And as a proud co-sponsor of the Federal Death Penalty Prohibition Act, Congress must also act. Let's end this racist, this flawed and inhumane practice once and for all. Save the life of this innocent man. Thank you, and I yield back.
Damn. So it does seem like he's gonna get executed for a crime he did not commit. Like, how does that make sense? This is so sad.
New at 4:30, lawyers for Marcellus Williams are now speaking to First Alert 4 nearly a week after a judge ruled against vacating Williams' murder conviction. Williams was sentenced to death for killing a former Post-Dispatch reporter back in 1998. Williams has roughly 6 days left to live before he's executed, but his allies and lawyers are making some last-ditch efforts. They're appealing the St. Louis County judge's ruling. They're requesting a federal appeals court examine racial discrimination during jury selection from the original trial, at least. They're hoping the governor will give clemency. But since becoming governor, Mike Parson has never spared the death row inmate's life.
So someone is always the first one, and certainly Marcellus has the case that I believe presents the perfect opportunity. Obviously, we believe our client is innocent and should come home, but at a minimum, the state should not execute someone when no one, not even the victim's family, wants it, and also when there are very credible claims of innocence.
Marcellus Williams' son is speaking exclusively to First Alert 4. He and the Innocence Project will explain why racial discrimination from jury selection may save Williams' life. You'll see that only on 4 at 6 o'clock.
Who is Marcellus Williams? Man facing execution in Missouri despite evidence of innocence, prosecutors' confession of racial bias at trial, and victim opposition. Mr. Williams is scheduled to be executed on September 24th. Governor Mike Parson has the power to stop this tragedy now, which he does. He does have the power to do that. A crime scene covered with forensic evidence contained no link to Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams has been seeking to prove his innocence throughout the 23 years he has spent in Missouri's death row. On August 11th, 1998, Felicia Gailey, a former reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, was found stabbed to death in her home. The perpetrator left behind considerable forensic evidence, including fingerprints, footprints, hair, and trace DNA on the murder weapon, a knife from Miss Gale's kitchen. None of these forensic evidences match Mr. Williams. Okay, listen, you already got me fucked up, and it's only been like 5 minutes into me reading this. You're telling me y'all have DNA evidence on the scene and it doesn't match this man and you're about to kill him? Be for real. Okay, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they didn't have forensic DNA evidence like that, right? They would preserve DNA, but they didn't have forensic evidence. Well, they had forensic evidence, but they didn't have the technology to be able to do genealogy, right? We didn't have Ancestry.com and all these different things. But in this day and age, if you're putting someone on death row period, I don't accept, I don't agree with. But if you're putting someone on death row and you have evidence that's not even tracing you, that's wild. The prosecution's case against Mr. Williams was based entirely on the unreliable testimony of 2 incentivized witnesses. So when we're talking about witnesses are notoriously unreliable. Notoriously unreliable. Because there have been so many instances where people have gone missing and they think they saw the person here, or they think they saw this here, but humans are not perfect. What we remember and what we see can always change. Our perceptions of things can change. So if you're putting someone behind bars just simply because of two witnesses, that better be ironclad. That better be ironclad, because testimonies from witnesses are usually unreliable. They're just unreliable. Makes sense. The trauma can dilute the memory. Exactly. The trauma can dilute the memory as well. And also, like, your memory can get blocked or your memory can become a little distorted. And it's normal. Like, we're humans, right? But it just makes these types of situations a lot more trickier, because it's like, well, what are we doing here? Are we killing somebody because of two unreliable witnesses? I mean, I'm not invalidating the fact that witnesses may have thought they saw something, but that doesn't necessarily mean someone needs to die for it if you can't corroborate it properly, right? The case against Mr. Williams turned on the testimony of two unreliable witnesses who were incentivized by promises of leniency in their own pending criminal cases and reward money. The investigation had gone cold until a jail inmate named Henry Cole, a man with a lengthy record, claimed that Mr. Williams confessed to him that he committed the murder while they were both locked up in jail. Cole directed police to Laura Asaro, a woman who had briefly dated Mr. Williams and had an extensive record of her own. Both of these individuals were known fabricators. Neither revealed any information that was not either included in the media accounts about the case or already known to the police. Their statements were inconsistent with their own prior statements, red flag number one, with each other's accounts and with the crime scene evidence, and none of the information they provided could be independently verified. Red flag number two. Aside from their testimony, the only evidence connecting Mr. Williams to the crime was a witness who said Mr. Williams sold him a laptop taken from Miss Gale's home, but the jury did not learn that Mr. Williams told the witness he had received the laptop from Laura Asaro. So essentially, this Laura Asaro woman that he dated is saying that he confessed to her, which then another inmate heard about, and then he sold a laptop to someone. The laptop was from his ex, but they believe the laptop is from the journalist's house, which is also false. Mr. Williams has repeatedly faced imminent execution as he has tried to prove his innocence. 9 years ago, the Missouri Supreme Court stayed Mr. Williams' execution and appointed a special master to review DNA testing of potentially exculpatory evidence. The DNA test conducted in 2016 showed that Mr. Williams was not the source of the male DNA found on the murder weapon. That's crazy! Wait, so the DNA actually separated him from the DNA on the murder weapon? What the hell? Why do we still have this man locked up? However, in 2017, after testing was completed, but without conducting a hearing or making any finding based on the outcome of the testing, the appointed special master sent Mr. Williams' case back to Missouri Supreme Court. That court also, without considering the DNA results, again scheduled Mr. Williams' execution on August 22, 2017, mere hours before he was to be executed, and after eating his final meal, Mr. Williams received a state of execution from the then Governor Eric Grittens. Governor Grittens recognized that the new DNA results raised serious doubts about Mr. Williams' guilt, and he convened the Board of Inquiry to investigate the case. Under Missouri law, the stay was to remain in place until the Board of Inquiry concluded its review and issued a formal report. However, in June 2023, while the board's inquiry review remained ongoing, Governor Mike Parson, without warning or notice, dissolved the board without a report or recommendation from the board. Immediately after Governor Parson dissolved the Board of Inquiry, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey sought a new execution date. This just seems like back to back balls dropping by the system. But at the end of the day, if the DNA from the murder weapon is not linking to the person that you're about to execute for that murder, that's a huge fucking problem. That's not good. That's a huge red flag. I mean, any prosecutor should be able to see that and think to themselves, oh, that's a red flag, you know what I mean? But I don't know how the law in Missouri works. So, although the victim's family opposes Mr. Williams' execution, the Missouri Attorney General has continued to fight to execute him. Why is the attorney general trying to fight to execute him, though, if even the family is not trying to execute him? After the corruption of the key DNA evidence came to light, Mr. Williams and the St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney's Office reached an agreement to ensure Mr. Williams is not wrongfully executed. Mr. Williams agreed to enter an Alford plea, admitting that the state has sufficient evidence to support his conviction in exchange for a sentence of life without parole. The victim's family supported this resolution of Mr. Williams' case and have said that they don't want Mr. Williams to get executed. On August 21st, the circuit court entered the consent judgment based on parties' agreement. Okay, let me guess. The ball was dropped again. Despite the closure this resolution would have brought to the case, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey sought a right of prohibition from the Missouri Supreme Court, which that court granted, ordering the circuit court to hold the previous scheduled evidentiary hearing. They held the evidentiary hearing on August 28 and subsequently ruled that it lacked sufficient evidence on which to find that Mr. Williams is innocent and that his claims of racially biased jury, selective and inefficient assistance of counsel had previously been raised and rejected. Accordingly, the court denied prosecuting attorney Bell's motion to vacate Williams' conviction. These are the things that you can do. You can help Mr. Williams in just execution by calling Governor Parson, signing the petition to stop Mr. Williams' execution. Use your voice, create an Instagram post, reel, or TikTok. I'm probably gonna make a post about this tomorrow, to be honest, because this is fucked up. This is really fucked up. That's really sad. I'm just wondering what videos there are about him on TikTok.
On Fox tonight, a Missouri judge rejects all legal efforts to vacate Marcellus Williams' conviction and death sentence, clearing the way for Williams' execution in less than 2 weeks. Fox 2's Kelly Hoskins joins us live outside the St. Louis County Courthouse in Clayton with more on today's decision. Kelly?
Well, Mandy, Marcellus Williams has always maintained his innocence. Meanwhile, St. Louis prosecuting attorney Wesley Bell filed a motion to vacate Williams' conviction based on this new DNA evidence that excluded Williams from the crime scene. A judge has denied a motion to vacate the murder conviction and schedule execution of Marcellus Williams.
The main thing with this particular case is his innocence. That should be the ground zero for any work that we do to make sure that an innocent person is not incarcerated, but also not executed. Like that definitely should be, where we completely draw a line in the sand.
Williams is on the death row for the 1998 death of Lisa Gale. He agreed to an Alford plea on August 21st, which allowed him to maintain his claim of innocence while still being convicted of first-degree murder in Gale's death. Gale was a social worker who previously worked as a reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
I believe that, the evidence and its mishandling definitely had an effect on the case overall.
So this man has also always maintained his innocence. He's never said that he did it or did a false confession or anything like that. We're talking about a man that got thrown into jail and got put on death row simply because 2 witnesses, one of which who was in jail, confessed that he's the one that did this murder so that that witness who was in jail could get less time and get some sort of an agreement to go out. Like, how is this even a thing? How is this even possible? And the thing is, though, we're talking about how stories of these like this never get the traction that they need to get, right? But that's why social media exists. That's why people like you and me exist. Things like Twitch, TikTok, and Instagram exist, right? I'm going to be making a video about this on the weekend. I'm going to be making a video about this tomorrow, actually. And I'm going to need all hands on deck. Like, all you guys are going to have to share it with the petition and the link. But this is why people like you and I exist, right? So that these stories can be heard, because this man is very clearly innocent. He's very clearly innocent, and all the governor has to do is exonerate him. And the governor has that power to do that. The question is, will the governor do it? That's the real question. And that's the question that neither you and I know the answer to. Hey, if you guys are not American, just put in a random address. So it says here, just say United States of America and just put a random address and zip code. Put one of these numbers in. You could put 94016, 94102, 94103. Just literally put your name and put one of those numbers in.
The United States is the only place where a black man can be found innocent using DNA evidence, but that does not stop his execution. You have no idea what I'm talking about. The state of Missouri is set to execute an innocent black man on September 24 for a crime that he did not commit and has been exonerated using DNA evidence since 2017, but he has been on death row since then. Governor Mike Person, who is the governor of Missouri, has decided that he does not care that DNA evidence has exonerated Marcellus Williams. They are going to go ahead with his execution, even though there is no.
Honestly, a lot of the times with some of these DAs, I feel like it's an ego trip, especially with these like district attorneys, especially since they have to like run and they have to get elected into office. A lot of the times they're scared that they're going to put their own position in danger. So they won't do these kinds of things, or they'll fuck up things like this so that they don't lose their position. But what they don't understand is that people are going to be more pissed off at you if you murder an innocent man than you go out of your way to save him. Especially when DNA evidence has exonerated him. Like, y'all, you don't understand. DNA is ironclad. If the DNA does not match the person didn't do it. It's literally that simple. And for some reason, it's too hard for people in Missouri to understand.
There's not a single connection to him from the crime scene other than 2 eyewitnesses who didn't actually witness the crime and got leniency for their own cases and reward money that turned on Marcellus. That is the only reason that Marcellus is currently in prison, is because of 2 individuals who got leniency for their cases and reward money that turned him in. There's no DNA connection to him, and he is innocent, but the state of Missouri has decided that they do not care. Because he's a black man, they want him dead. If you would like to help, this is the number for the governor's office in Missouri. Please call and ask that they stop Marcellus' execution because he is an innocent black man.
It's just so sad. This man didn't do anything.
Right now, you're looking at an innocent man currently awaiting execution. 7 years ago, the DNA on the murder weapon was finally tested and proved it was not his.
Whoever handled this knife left DNA. It is not Marcellus Williams.
His execution was stayed by the then governor, and a panel was convened to reassess his conviction.
Today, a panel will work to decide if that evidence proves Williams is innocent.
So, why is he still here?
How innocent do you have to be to avoid being executed?
This is an injustice, it's wrong. The evidence shows my dad is innocent.
The closer you get to execution, the stranger things get.
On August 11th, 1998, Felicia Gale, a 42-year-old former reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, was brutally murdered in her home in St. Louis, Missouri. She had been stabbed over 40 times. It mimicked a murder that had happened just 24 days before. Another woman, Deborah McLean, was murdered in her kitchen with a knife taken from the home, an eerily similar scene to Alicia Gale's murder. The investigation languished for months. Despite the similarities between the 2 murders, the knives being left at both scenes, there being bloody footprints in Gale's house, the police had little to go on. No eyewitnesses, no leads for either. Then, a year later, there was a break in the Gale case. It came in the form of a man named Henry Cole, a jailhouse informant who had said his cellmate had confessed to the murder. That eventually led to the arrest of Marcellus Williams, who was charged with Gale's murder. McLean's murder remains unsolved to this day, but Marcellus was in lockup, so he couldn't have done it. The case against Williams for Gale's murder was largely circumstantial.
This was a very brutal murder of a woman who was found in her home having been stabbed to death. There were bloody footprints at the crime scene, fingerprints, hairs found in the victim's hand, none of which matched Marcellus. Those were not his bloody footprints, those were not his hairs, and the fingerprints were destroyed.
The state's prosecution relied heavily on the testimony of 2 informants who had been incentivized to testify.
The only evidence they used to convict him is what we call incentivized informant testimonies. Individuals who came forward because they had something to gain.
The first was Cole.
So Marcellus had been in the workhouse, and someone who was incarcerated with him hears there's reward money and essentially says, I want this reward money and I want help with my own case, and says he won't even testify until he gets that reward money.
The second was Williams' former girlfriend, Laura Sorrow.
In addition, there's another individual, a woman who Marcellus was known to affiliate with. Notably, the 2 of them contradict each other in what they say would have happened and contradict physical evidence that's found at the crime scene.
The key piece of evidence brought against him was Gale's laptop, which he was said to have sold.
The last piece of evidence that they use is a laptop that had been taken from the victim's house that Marcellus did sell. But what wasn't presented at trial was that the woman that had come forward and said she had information and manufactured these statements about Marcellus is the person who gave him that laptop. And so it wasn't allowed to.
So 2 informants were people who were incarcerated and had incentive to lie. DNA evidence did not even match his DNA, even though there were loads of DNA evidence that was left there. And you know that the 2 witnesses lied. Why is this man still on death row is my question.
To come out that really the only connection to the crime is this informant and not Marcellus Williams.
There were even eyewitnesses who had said they had seen Asaro with the laptop while Marcellus was still in county.
Usually in death penalty cases, the evidence of guilt is overwhelming, and the only real issue you can litigate in most cases is whether the death penalty was appropriately given. This case was different in that the evidence that they used to convict him was pretty thin and questionable.
All of this should have been easy to poke holes in for most attorneys, but these problems continued at trial. Since his conviction, Williams has argued in several motions that he received ineffective counsel during the trial, which came...
Okay, also chat, I don't understand how this man only has 6,000 subscribers, because this man deserves way more subscribers.
From a public defender assigned to him. It's no secret that America's public defender system has been stretched to its breaking point, but nowhere near as much as Missouri, which ranks 49th in the country in spending on indigent defenses. In 2017 alone, 320 public defenders handled 80,000 cases in the state of Missouri. The state has repeatedly vetoed bills that would supply funding to help alleviate this caseload.
The Missouri State Public Defender System is asking for more taxpayer money. They say thousands of defendants are on waiting lists because the office does not have enough attorneys to represent them.
It leaves people like Williams with inadequate counsel and inevitable outcomes like wrongful convictions.
Preparing a case for trial takes hundreds of hours if done properly. And if not done properly, then we end up with all these wrongful convictions.
At jury selection, Marcellus ended up with a mostly white jury when the prosecution struck 6 of the 7 qualified black jurors. When the trial was over, despite the questionable witnesses and the evidence being all circumstantial, they deliberated for less than 90 minutes before finding him guilty. There's something in the U.S. judicial system called a Batson challenge that is supposed to prevent the prosecution from striking qualified jurors on the sole ground of group bias. In this case, race. This was a black man being tried by an almost entirely white jury for a white woman's death in Missouri in the 1990s. When Marcellus' defense tried to argue Batson in a 2000...
Yeah, he had no chance. He had no chance, and that was before the DNA evidence even exonerated him. You're trying to tell a mostly white jury about a white woman's brutal murder that this black man is innocent. I mean, this case is riddled with so much just negligence and ball dropping. It's nauseating. And honestly, if this man does get murdered, it's the governor's fault.
2003 motion, the state indicated that the jurors were struck because the prosecution stated their clothing indicated they were trying to be different. But that was reason enough and not racially motivated, so Batson didn't apply. For years, Marcellus pleaded his innocence. His case was taken up by multiple different legal teams who fought tooth and nail to finally get the DNA that they had found on the knife properly tested. It turned out to be another man's profile.
There is a DNA testing statute in the Missouri law, but it's real narrowly written, so we just had to make that request and a broader claim of that he was innocent, or there's enough doubts about his innocence that he shouldn't be executed, and we can prove it if you let us do this further DNA testing.
It's not always a weapon like in Marcellus's case where it's left in the victim's body. That's a incredibly obvious piece of evidence. It's to know that
2 things are very important in a murder case. It's the murder weapon, so the weapon that was used to murder the person, and the body. It's very hard to try a case if you don't have the body. It's not impossible, but it's hard to do it without a body and without a murder weapon, right? If a murder weapon was involved. But in this case, not only was the body there, but the murder weapon was inside the body. So that's like clear cut, very clear cut. And usually you don't get those 2 together, right? Which is why murder cases are so hard, because a lot of the times the police know that a person has murdered a person, right? But they have a very hard time taking them to trial because they don't know where the body is, right? Like they can't find the body. Now you can still take that person to trial. It's just much harder. So the fact that both of those were there at the crime scene is also just wild, because you have so much evidence, just period, that this man is innocent, and you're still hell-bent on killing him over something he very clearly didn't do.
wasn't tested was just shocking. It just blew my mind. Don't you think you should test it before you execute this man? Went through the evidence. I produced my analysis, which was pretty simple. There was a clear male profile on the handle, not Marcellus Williams. To me, that seemed sufficient to reopen the case.
This went on for months without any movement. No evidentiary hearings, no chance to present this new evidence. Then, at the last minute, just hours before his execution, the Governor Eric Greitens decided to stay his execution.
Marcellus Williams would be dead tonight without Governor Eric Greitens issuing a stay of execution.
Marcellus remembers that day.
I was like maybe a couple of hours away from being executed. I actually seen the execution team go into the little room, with their little materials. I had already came to grips with that.
In staying the execution, Greitens cited the new DNA evidence and assigned a board of retired judges to convene and make a decision on if Marcellus deserved a new trial.
Governor Greitens will appoint 5 retired judges to the panel to review Marcellus Williams' case, including that new DNA evidence.
Everyone was hopeful.
It's looking way better
And then they dropped the ball again.
than it was before. Anything better than him facing death penalty. So now he getting the chance and the shot he needed for them to look over the DNA evidence.
But this sentiment was short-lived because what happened following that was nothing short of stunning. The board of inquiry is something unique to the state of Missouri. It's a law that's been rarely invoked, and each of the few times it has yielded bizarre results. In the late 90s, the then Governor Mel Carnahan issued a stay of execution and invoked the board of inquiry to look into the case of William Theodore Boliak Jr. Carnahan then died in a plane crash, and because of the wording in his stay, Boliak remains on death row to this day, with his execution being forever stayed. In Marcellus's case, the board of inquiry that then Governor Eric Greitens requested to convene did in fact meet. It was the first movement in a while and gave him and his legal team hope.
Are you hopeful now with this board required?
I'm hopeful, but I don't believe or trust in the judicial system. But I'm hopeful that some good will come out of it one way or another. And I'll just leave it at that.
Marcellus's hesitation here, born of a lengthy and complicated legal process that had kept him behind bars for years, proved to be prescient. This hope was indeed short-lived because as the board began to meet, something happened.
Missouri Republican Governor Eric Greitens, once considered a rising star in the GOP, has just resigned this afternoon amid an impeachment effort sparked by a pair of scandals.
Today, I am announcing that I will resign as governor of Missouri, effective Friday, June 1st at 5 p.m.
When former Missouri Governor Eric Greitens issued that stay, he impaneled a special board to examine the facts of the case and make a recommendation. But then a personal scandal forced Greitens out, leaving the board in jeopardy and the future of Marcellus Williams entirely unclear.
I feel so fucking bad for this man. I feel like every single time he had a shot at a life, it just got ripped away from him for issues that don't even relate to him, like issues that have nothing to do with him. This is the petition for Marcellus Williams, and we are almost at 400,000 signatures at the time that I'm filming this. So please sign this petition. It is pinned in the chat, but it will be in the bio for those of you watching on YouTube. It's really simple, it's really quick, it's really easy. We need to get this man off of death row. Like, this is a grave injustice.